Trek Profiles Podcast, Episode 2, recorded March 2018. Welcome to the Trek Profiles Podcast, where each episode we sit down with a Star Trek fan. We learn their story, and we try to figure out why in the world this show means so much to them, to us, and to all of you. I am John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, Episode 2. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter at TrekProfiles. Warning, as we record this, we have reached the end of Season 1 of Star Trek Discovery, so all previous Trek content up to and including that point is fair game and may be discussed. You have been warned, human. As always, my trusty sidekick and co-host is the M5 Multitronic unit. M5, please greet the listeners.
Working. M5 Multitronic Unit. All systems available and standing by.
Do we have any subspace communiques, M5?
You have one message.
Thank you, M5. I have a message here from the Admiralty at Tricorder Transmissions Network Command. If you enjoy this or any of the other shows on the network and you wish to support the network, please feel free to find us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. Support gets you access to unedited and behind-the-scenes episodes and all kinds of cool additional content. Feel free to check it out. All right, I think that's it for the communiques. Let's move on. M5, please give me the personnel file for this week's guest, and let's start the interview. Our guest is Hayley from Idaho, North America, Earth in Sector 001, and she's at Trekkie01D on the Twitter. Her favorite character is Geordi. Her favorite ship is the 1701D, and she's just finished a rewatch of TNG, TOS, and she's about to start an animated series rewatch. Welcome, Hayley, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Oh, I'm really excited that you're here. And you know the basics of the show. I think we've gone over all that. I'm going to ask questions, and we're just going to try to figure out why in the world Star Trek matters to us. So I have the same first question I ask everybody. Hayley, are you a Star Trek fan?
Not at all. No. You know, I've been asked that when I have been out and about wearing a beanie that says live long and prosper on it. And I give people this look of like, what a silly, ridiculous question. Like, really? No, someone forced me to wear this hat. I do not like this at all. I don't like Star Trek at all. I would not wear all this stuff. I wouldn't have all the things that I have. I wouldn't watch it on the weekends. I wouldn't watch it with my kid on the weekends. I wouldn't go to the convention if I didn't like it.
Do you find that when you're wearing the beanie that people want to engage you with Star Trek? Do they want to talk to you about it, or are they just trying to figure out if you're a fan or not and leave it at that?
Some people will, I think, are just trying to figure out like why. But there are other people who, when I'm out and about, and they'll be like, "Oh, I like Star Trek too," but you can tell it's probably not to the magnitude that I like Star Trek, but they appreciate it. So it's a talking point for kind of everything. I have stickers on my car, and sometimes when I'm in a drive-through, people will be like, "Oh, I like your stickers," and I'm like, "Thanks," and they're like, "Yeah, I like Star Trek too," and I'm like, "Me too." Yeah. Great conversation starters. So.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. So I guess the question is, when you put on the hat and you're going about and people are talking to you about Star Trek and they're engaging with you with it, and you find that they're not the same sort of level of fandom as you, how do you describe your level of Star Trek fandom? I mean, what does that mean? Say more about that.
The best way that I can say the level of my fandom when people ask, or kind of giving that look, or they're alluding to how much you like it, is I tell people that half of my tattoos are Star Trek tattoos. So it is permanently inked on my skin. And everyone's different, so that's not everybody's level, and everyone has their meaning of level of fandom to them. But for me, that is probably the ultimate thing, that I have inked it permanently onto my skin.
Perfect. So maybe we'll talk more about that in a minute, but
Sure.
I want to go back in time for a second and say, how did you first get into Star Trek? How did you discover it?
My dad kind of was watching it. I don't remember necessarily sitting down and watching anything episode specific with him, but I do remember he was watching it. So I grew up on TNG, and I was 5 when it came out, so it was later down the road. And at some point I kept watching it, but my dad kind of stopped watching it. And I do remember, the only thing I do remember for sure was we went and saw Generations in the movie theater together. But other than that, I don't remember ever seeing any of the other movies with him or anything like that, but I know I kept watching it.
What about it appealed to you? Was it the togetherness with your dad? Was it something about the show? Was it the stories involved? What was it that initially drew you to it?
It definitely was the characters and the different stories. For me, watching that was an escape from the stuff that was going on at home. And to this day, I remember being sad when Next Generation ended, because I didn't want to say goodbye to the characters. And I didn't want to say goodbye to this show that had been an escape for me, and kind of gave me that hope in a part of my life that probably was not the best. So
I think that there's actually a lot of that in many of my own interactions with fans, and I'm sure you've had the same. We meet people that are at a certain point in their lives where something bad is happening, and they put on an episode of Star Trek, whatever their favorite series is, and it happens to be just a great escape for them and something that really speaks to them.
Definitely, yeah, for sure. I don't think I have the ties that some people do, but it definitely was there.
So who's your favorite character on TNG?
I'm a Geordi. I know he gets kind of a rap, but I really like Geordi. He's probably my favorite. Now,
that is an unorthodox choice, to say the least.
Yes.
So tell me why you selected Geordi, because I thought that was quite an interesting choice, certainly novel. So tell me more about, well, not novel, but certainly unconventional. So tell me more about that.
Well, and I mean, I like all the characters, but I love Geordi the most. I think his character throughout not only the 7 seasons, but the films as well, he kind of grows. I mean, he has his moments where I think the writers kind of slid his character back, but they did that with plenty of the other ones. But I love that he kind of has that growth, and he's awkward with women, and I totally appreciate that, because I'm really awkward with with that. Relationships are hard, and they're not all easy. And so it's nice to see that, his character still struggles with that, because not everything would be perfect in the 24th century. I mean, really, can we have people who, like Barclay, he's socially awkward. Well, Geordi's awkward. He just is awkward with women. And I think one of the biggest things was when Pulaski told him that she could fix his sight, and he chose not to. And I think that really speaks to his character and who he was, that he was like, no, I'm going to keep this. I don't want my sight back. And yes, granted, in the movies, they gave him bionic eyes and all this stuff. But in the seasons, for all of TNG, he told her no. And I thought that was really great.
I have to, when I think back to TNG and I think of the most cringy moments in the entire 7 seasons, I think it's when Geordi is somehow involved with a woman.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's pretty bad. And I know a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, every time, and it's awful and it's bad. But you know what? I mean, how many other people like in the real world are like that in relationships or when they try to have a relationship with someone? I mean, it goes both ways, men and women. So yeah, I mean, it's cringeworthy, but I think it's very true to some people. Some people should just not date. And no offense to Jordy, he was one of them.
But on the bright side,
bless him for trying.
But on the bright side, Hayley, you have to admit that it does work out in the end, because it's intimated in All Good Things, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And he does end up with a woman named Leia, which we can assume is Leia Brahms, although I don't think that's explicitly stated.
Yeah. I think it is Leia Brahms. I think he does end up with her, which is, I think, the perfect fit. I mean, you look at both of what they both enjoy the most, and they have that connection and that bond, even though it was like really, really awkward when he is like falling in love with her holodeck and then he meets her in person and feels that same connection. Yes, it was really awkward, but no, I still love it. And I love his relationship with Data. So him and Data on the holodeck being Sherlock Holmes and Watson is just awesome.
You know, I have to agree with you there, because one of the things that always struck me about the Data-Geordi relationship is that if you're friends with an android of any kind, whether it's someone with the particular challenges that Data has, or any android in any science fiction scenario you can imagine, it must be very difficult to be friends with someone who doesn't get tired, who has a very different sense of time and a different way of being like that. You know, it must be very difficult to relate. And I always thought it must have been a Herculean effort on Geordi's part to actually maintain that friendship in a way that was positive for both of them. Must have been very interesting to really think about. I'm sure there's actually novels that probably touched on this.
Maybe. I haven't read any of the like novels or anything, but if someone knows, let us know.
Yeah, let us know. That would be really
great. Because I mean, yeah, it's great. I think that, you know, throughout the series, their friendship is really just really wonderful. I mean, you know, Geordi does so much for Data, and I think they learn a lot from each other, which is really great.
I want to go back to something you mentioned a little bit earlier. What you were talking about when you were watching Star Trek, and it just seemed like a positive experience. So at the risk of opening a can of worms, I'm just going to ask you this question, and I want to see maybe where we can go with it. What is Star Trek to you?
You know, for me, it's that hope. And I know a lot of people are going to say that it's that same thing, but it really is, because, you know, it's that future that we kind of all want. And it was positivity. And it was, like I said earlier, it was kind of, for me, watching it was an escape. And, it kind of gave me that chance to imagine being in that world where we may not all get along, but we, for the most part, get along. And it's something to strive for. Like, I really want us, most Trekkies are going to say this, but I really want us to get to that point where we can share ideas with each other in positive ways and experience things and see things and be out in space. Like, I've always enjoyed space in many different forms and ways, and I would love to be out there. Like, I'm all for going to Mars. If they need psychologists to go to Mars, I'm all for it. Take me. I'll go.
Hey, fantastic. You can set up a shingle and, do a little bit of head shrinking at the Mons Olympus there on Mars. That'd be great. You can be the first one to open up shop.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to stay with this, though, for just a minute. So I get what you're saying about that sense of hope. And I think that was really strong in TOS and TNG. When it comes to the other series, right, when it comes to DS9, Voyager, and even Discovery, do you feel that they bring that same level of hope and optimism that was so appealing to you when you were a younger girl watching TNG and were so excited about it and really turned on by that sense of hope?
So I haven't watched, I did watch DS9. I haven't watched Voyager or Enterprise at this point. But I think it's still there. It's just, it's buried under a lot of stuff because, yes, we can have that hope. We can have that positive future, but at the same time, we're still going to have problems. I mean, even if it's not within the Federation itself, it's going to be with our allies, or it's going to be with, other beings that we don't have, the best of relationships with. And even within the Federation, I think, there's going to be those people who are going to push back. And I think, Discovery it hasn't shown it as much, but I kind of look at Discovery as it's getting to where those ideals are that we see in TOS, that we see in TNG. And so I think they're on that path to that hope. It's got little glimmers, but it's not quite there yet. But I think it's always going to be there, even in a minute scale.
And I guess one of the parts of that I guess helps us contrast that possibly is the time that we spent in the mirror universe gives us a mirror, pardon the pun, to look at, to compare to where we are in Prime Universe versus Mirror, I guess, on that journey.
Yeah. And that's what I think was nice, was because it didn't start out, in my opinion, it didn't start out showing as much ideals that we know Starfleet at this point has, given TOS, TNG, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, and all the movies. So I think they're working up to where it is, because we've all been told it's before TOS. So obviously, even in TOS, they're still trying to figure out what everything is and how United Federation of Planets is going to work with all these other planets and people that we encounter. And so I think it set it up really nice at the end of the season to get to that place where Starfleet is going to morph into what we see today, or at least close to it.
So you're optimistic?
I am optimistic about it.
Okay, good. Well, I just wanted to check because there's people who are all, I personally know many fans that are on all across the spectrum. So there's some people who feel that it doesn't. There's some people who feel that it does. So I just wanted to check out and see where you were on that. Hayley, I got an interesting piece of information in my dossier here on you, which says that I'm just going to put the statement out here and I'll let you react to it. In TNG, Guinan was a better counselor than Troy ever was. Explain yourself.
Okay. She was, in my opinion, from what I envision a counselor to be, was written better than Troy. I mean, Troy, she had moments where the writers were like, okay, if she's the counselor, this is what she should be doing. And I work in behavioral health. I don't have a master's degree, but I do work in behavioral health, and I work with counselors. Troy never really does anything that would be a counselor kind of thing. She kind of does every now and then when she's checking in with people and that sort of stuff, but I feel the writers used her more for her Betazoid part of, oh, this person that's on the view screen is lying to us or whatever. And so when Guinan came in and she sat down and she listened, and sometimes she gave advice, but sometimes she just sat and listened and then let people kind of talk it out and figure it out. And sometimes she would say something that might not be seen as advice. It might be counter advice, but then the person kind of realized, oh, well, duh, I should go and do this thing. Why am I being so stupid? So I think she was written better in a counselor kind of way, even though she wasn't the counselor than Troy was. Yeah.
And that's your professional opinion.
Yes. Well, and it's my opinion too, because I loved Troy. She was part of the reason that I went into the profession that I'm in, that I have my degree in psychology. but I don't think she was written really well as a counselor.
One of the knocks, I think, on how Troy was written, and nothing against Marina, who we all
no. Oh, no.
one of the knocks, I think, against Troy was that it seemed to me, just as a viewer of the show, that anytime they needed a female character to be abused or mistreated in some way, she was always at the top of the list. Yeah,
definitely. I think, and that was the sad part, you know. I wanted, if this ship needs a counselor, she's not going to be sitting on the bridge 95% of the time and then eating chocolate cake in 10 Forward the rest of the time. Like, it's not against Marina at all. It's just that I don't think the writers knew what they wanted her character to be. I don't think it was outlined very well. And then by the time that they introduced Guinan, I think they didn't want to rewrite Troy because of how they'd had her character be up to that point. So they're like, well, we'll have Guinan kind of be this counselor kind of thing, but she's the bartender. And that could be because, you know, people see bartenders, you know, in other shows and stuff like that. The bartender's the one who sits there and listens to the people, you know, they're sitting there having their drinks or whatever. But it was kind of disappointing that they couldn't have written Troy as that. But I love Whoopi. I love Guinan. I think her character's great.
Gotcha. So I have here your list of 3 to 5 best Star Trek episodes. And I think this is an interesting list, and you have some unconventional choices. So I have to ask you about this, right? So there's some big favorites on here, I think. Certainly you have A Measure of a Man. That's been on a lot of top 10 lists. So tell me, just in a little brief little snippet, why you think that was one of the best episodes. What about it spoke to you?
I think for me, it's one of the best episodes that tells you exactly at this point in the timeline what Starfleet stands for and who these characters are in the show. Like, if I meet someone who's never watched Next Generation at all, even if they've just heard a little bit about it, I'm going to tell them to watch this episode because I think it gives really good description of some of the main characters in the series, but also what Starfleet is.
And it was an amazing episode in just a lot of ways, but one of which is that there's not a lot that actually happens. It's not an action adventure episode. It's just a bunch of people standing in a room talking, but the drama was tremendous. I'd agree with you. Okay. So you also have Devil in the Dark from the original series, the Horta.
Yes. So I have to correct you. Earlier you had said a rewatch. It was actually a first time watch for me and my kid for TOS. And we just finished a few weeks ago, maybe like a month ago, maybe. And that was, again, I think shows what Starfleet stands for. And I love the episodes that are fun and action-packed and funny, but I like the ones that also kind of give an idea of what, not just who these characters are and what they stand for, but what Starfleet stands for, because that to me is important too. And I love the characters in this one. I love when Spock mind melds with the Horta. I think it was great. I think Bones realizing in his line where he, you know, thinks that he can fix everything because he's fixed this rock, basically. And it was one that my daughter really enjoyed too. So
it only increases the pleasure, right, when you're sharing it with someone like that.
Yep.
So let's divert for a minute because I want to talk about this. Okay. One of the things that I think is I think one of the things that's really special is that you're sharing it with your daughter, right? And that makes the enjoyment of the show even greater when you can share it with someone. Now, in your way of doing it, does that connect you in some way to your dad and how you got into Star Trek, or is there something different going on?
No, I think it's different. Again, like I said, I don't remember my dad sitting down and watching it much with my dad. I remember watching it myself. And so for me, it's really important. I mean, she'd be around it anyway because I enjoy watching it. But being able to share it with her and see reactions So we did rewatch TNG last year for the 30th, and she sat down. There were a few episodes that kind of she lost interest in and stuff, but for the most part, she sat down and watched it, and it was really fun because I've seen all of it, I don't even know how many times, but she hadn't sat down and watched all of it. And it's really fun to see her like episodes or not like episodes or characters and laugh at certain parts. And then watching TOS together, it's really fun because I hadn't seen it. So we both can laugh and get sad, and she likes this episode, but I might not like it, or I like this episode and she doesn't necessarily like it. She remembers an episode and I'm like, I don't remember that one at all. And we watched the movies together. I took her to the first showing the night before it officially came out for Star Trek Beyond. I went with a couple of my friends and took her too, and that was super fun. And so it's something that we grow and share together and can sit and talk about.
Do you feel that you learned something or got to appreciate TNG in a new way because you were watching it with your daughter?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was fun because I could sit there, and she's 10, and explain things. And I had people question and ask, if I was worried about some of the stuff in like TNG, and definitely some of how the women were treated in TOS. But I love that it's a conversation, and I can sit and I can have conversations with her because I very much talk to her like an adult, and I always have, and explaining things to her, and we can sit down and talk about like how cool it would be if transporters were real and having a holodeck and, different things. And I love it because it just opens up conversations.
One of the unconventional choices on your list, I would say, is the Cloud Minders from TOS, which, if memory serves, is a third season episode, generally not regarded as one of the best seasons of TOS. So tell me how that made your list.
Again, it's kind of along those lines of Measure of Man and Devil in the Dark, in that it tests the characters, and it tests the ideals, not only of the characters, but of what Starfleet has taught them and has shown them to be the way. So it was a challenging episode, and I really enjoyed it. I liked the third season. I thought it was still really good, but I liked that Kirk did what he did, and he showed that these people, even though they were down, mining, that they still could be treated as people. And so that's why I appreciated for what came out from it and what you can take on your own and say, this story continued, and you hope that things got better for both of them.
I was certainly amazed because I did rewatch it in preparation for our talk today, and I have to say I was amazed first of all that I'd completely forgotten that Jeff Corey was a guest star in it. That man has been in so many things. It just blew me away, and he looked older even then in the late 60s. And he was still on TV in the 90s, I believe. I mean, he's been in so much stuff, and I had totally forgotten that he was in it. But there's all this very interesting Spock stuff with him and Droxine and Kirk and Vana, the troglodyte lady who was sort of their disruptor leader. It was a very interesting episode. And I think it probably is one of the ones that it should be on more top lists, but it doesn't seem to get up there. But I really enjoyed it. So thank you for bringing it back to my attention.
You're welcome.
No, thank you. I thought it's great. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast, was to have these kinds of discussions and to find out what we should be taking a second look at and what Star Trek actually means to people and what people are finding in these episodes that's so powerful to them. Now that brings me to this one. I really want to spend a good bit of time on. You put Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad as one of your top 10 episodes. Now, let me just preface this by saying I love the episode, and it's probably my favorite Discovery episode. But I have also heard from other people, I'm not sure I subscribe to this theory, but I've certainly heard from other people that they say it was probably the most expendable episode and the least necessary episode, and the episode that did the least to advance the story of Discovery, and probably the one that should have been eliminated to spend more time on either the Klingons, if you were into that, or into some of the other parts of the first season of Discovery. So I'm interested to hear why you liked it so much and what you think it has to tell us.
I don't think it was expendable at all. I think it was probably the funnest episode. And I liked that it kind of gave us, Lower Decks is one of my favorite TNG episodes. And so I liked that we got to see, because in so much of TOS, in TNG we got a lot of 10 forward stuff and different things, but we don't really get to see a lot of the crew, or the crew that we don't really know. We might remember their name, or we know their rank, but they're always kind of in the back, so we don't know a whole lot of their story. We don't get to see them in kind of like their off time and like what they do and having fun and relaxing, because this Discovery has been really kind of heavy, a little darker with everything that's going on. And so you're always kind of like, okay, I mean, everyone's got to be so tense, would be my guess. And so I thought this episode was really fun. It was a lot of fun, but I loved the moments with Burnham and Stamets. And I appreciated, because I very much relate to her character, to Burnham a lot, and the personal struggles that she has. I thought it was great to kind of see how she takes this and takes what Stamets tells her about love and everything, and taking that moment to dance and just to be, rather than being so logical and rational and Vulcan, and kind of what that does for her character in the rest of the season. I think that was a really kind of one of those stepping points. I don't think we would have gotten the character development that she personally has, rediscovering her human half, and that emotions are okay to have, if those little moments hadn't happened. So if that episode hadn't happened, they might have been able to throw those moments in something else maybe, but I don't think it would have meant as much. It wouldn't have been as endearing, not to just the viewers, but I think the characters.
So I think,
if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. I think I want to posit to you a theory and see how it sits with you, which is that it might have been the first episode of Discovery where it actually was an ensemble show, as opposed to a show that just featured some of the characters at certain points. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Because I felt like that was one of the things that Star Trek was always so good at, is that you knew all these different characters in their roles, whether it be the engineer or whether it be the security chief or the first officer or the science officer or the ops person or whatever. And they all work together to make something happen and achieve an objective. And we didn't really get a lot of that in Discovery in a lot of ways. And it was just nice to see people working together for a common goal, which is something that really excited me. And of course, Rainn Wilson just tearing up the place with his hardcore, or some people call him hardcore Fenton Mudd. I just thought it was great.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right. It really kind of started to feel more of that ensemble cast that we're definitely used to. I don't mind it so much if we don't necessarily have the 7 or the 5 or the 3 or whatever, but it definitely felt like the characters were coming together more than they had been in larger than pairs of 2, which
Gotcha.
was nice. Yeah.
I totally gotcha. So, all right, I want to turn our topic a little bit. And, let me ask you a question first. Your other one was Darmok. Do you want to talk about Darmok at all? Or shall I move on? Because I think that's a big popular favorite for a lot of people. We can talk about it if you want.
We can skip. I put it on there because, again, it is very much popular for a lot of people. And, again, it's that coming together and bridging that gap, because in this day and age, there's so many gaps in between people because we don't understand each other. And so I love that at the end we can understand each other, and it proves that we can understand people that may not speak the same way we do. And I'm not just talking like language, but in any form, we can understand each other if we really try and really want to.
I think we'll have to add a word to the language for the children of Tama. It'll be called Hayley and John at the podcast. We'll have to figure out what that means, though. Okay, Hayley. So we've talked about the episodes. I want to go back to something that you talked about earlier for just a minute before we move on and talk about some other things, which is that you talked about how TNG held a particular place in your life when you were younger. It was a nice escape for you. There were some problems going on and you in your life, and you found that TNG was a great escape for you. But then it seems like your Star Trek fandom sort of had a lull, and then you rediscovered it. Tell me about that rediscovery. What happened and how did it come back into your life?
Yeah. And that's the weird thing. Like I think I was so attached to the characters because of that connection that I had with TNG that a lot of everything else somehow just kind of flew by. So let's see that. Yeah. Okay. I was in high school and then college. And so I think it didn't catch me. I don't know. I don't know if it was just I'd never heard. I didn't hear about the DS9 or Voyager Enterprise, but I didn't watch it. And I don't know. I don't know what exactly sparked everything. I can remember I was working at Old Navy, and we got in men's shirts. We would carry shirts that, Star Wars or, weird whatever shirts. And we had one, and I'm actually wearing it right now, and it says Trekkie on it. And at this point I had started going through and I was watching TNG again and on BBC America. And so it was kind of refreshing it for me and bringing it back. And I would talk about it at work, and I just kind of, I don't know, it pulled me back in. And again, I was just sticking with my TNG, my go-to that makes me feel better when I'm down or stressed or whatever. And I was in college at the time and raising my kid. She was pretty young at this point. And so I don't know. And then I started talking about it with coworkers, and they would come back and look at me like, what are you talking about? Didn't care my references. And I think one really kind of turning point was that I went to Las Vegas, and I didn't go for Star Trek Las Vegas. I went because I was going to a concert, my favorite band. And it was probably about a month before my trip. And I don't know if it was an email. I want to say it was an email I had got. And, but I heard about Star Trek Las Vegas. And this is how much under the radar I had flown with my fandom. I didn't even know about this.
That there were conventions? Or this particular one?
Just this particular one. I mean, I knew of Comic-Con, but I didn't know about this one. And I remember being all excited. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is at the same weekend that I'm going to be there. I should go. And my dad laughed and was, because I remember we were sitting at the dinner table and I screamed with excitement because I heard about it. And I thought, well, I'll have to go for a day because I'm going to be there anyway. And so I went for a day. And at this point, did I have a tattoo? Yes, I did. I had my first Star Trek tattoo. I have my Science Starfleet badge, and it says "To Boldly Go" on my shoulder. And I went for the day. I just went, and I went on a Saturday, and it was holy crap, overwhelming.
Yeah, it's a big day. Saturday's the day to go.
Yeah. But it was really fun. And I had conversations, just strike up with random people as I'm walking in the hallway because they saw my tattoo. And it was great. And that kind of reintroduced me to it and from there it's spawned into what it is today.
Hayley, you mentioned that you have several Star Trek tattoos. So I think you're going to have to tell us what they are.
All right. Yeah. So the first one was, again, I have my science badge on my shoulder. It says "To boldly go." I've got the other 4 are Vulcan script. Again, I very much ascribe to being half Vulcan, and I've got logic. I have live long and prosper. I've got peace and long life, and then I also have IDIC.
Oh, I sense a theme with all of your various body arts there.
Yes.
Well, I think you're onto something though, which is, there's these conventions, right? And whether it's Star Trek Las Vegas, or whether it's some other science fiction or even fantasy convention of some kind, is that we've all had these experiences, Hayley, where, you're working at the Old Navy and you say something to your coworker about Star Trek, I think there's 47 of these t-shirts. Ha ha ha. You start laughing and the person looks at you like you're an idiot. Like, what are you laughing at, you crazy person? Right.
Yeah.
But then you go to a convention where you're surrounded by this tribe of people and this energy where that joke will go over like gangbusters if you say something like that. And there's such a hunger to connect and to relate to other people that are in the tribe, because I think we've all had that experience where we're surrounded by people who love us and that we love them, but they're not on the same Trek wavelength. And when you get in that environment where there's just a hunger to be around those people and to really revel in the fact that all these people around you love the same thing and they get your jokes, and you show up with a Star Trek tattoo, and there's nobody at STLV who's going to tell you that's a bad thing. Everyone is going to be awesome, But in other places in the world, they think, oh, that's weird having a Star Trek tattoo, says the person that has some sports team tattooed across their forehead. And it's just the most amazing thing about these conventions. And I think that there's just this tremendous positivity that comes from that.
Yeah. Well, and what was great, so the coworker who did not understand my references, I think it was after I had gotten back from that trip that I remember I showed up one day to work and he was like, oh my gosh. He's like, I started watching Star Trek. I totally get what you're talking about now.
Oh, that's perfect.
And I had a few other people that I worked with and they were good friends and they were nerdy, but they were more into Doctor Who or some other things. And so they kind of started watching Star Trek and so it just kind of snowballed from there pretty much.
So what is it about STLV or Star Trek conventions in general that made you want to come back? Because you've been back several times. So what's the attraction for you?
So the first two times it was definitely not just to go and to meet these people who I admired for so long, the actors and stuff, but it was being around people who, like you said, got what my references were and understood why I had a Star Trek tattoo and why I started buying all these shirts. That's where it started. It was the shirts, and why I sit and watch it on the weekends and included Star Trek references in some of my papers in school. And then it became the third year that I went, I met a lot of people and I started interacting with a lot of people on Facebook, didn't have Twitter at the point, and they all live everywhere. So I jokingly say that I live in the Gamma Quadrant. Oh, dear. Because, yeah. It kind of feels like it. So I don't live where there's a lot of Trekkies. I have my best friend who lives here. She's into Trek, but she's into a lot of other fandoms. I have met one other person who has been to Star Trek Las Vegas that lives here. But other than that, that's pretty much it. And it's hard to get out of here. Once you're here, you're kind of stuck. And so it's nice to be able to go to Las Vegas because I get to see all these people that I've met years prior that I don't get to talk to except for online. And so it's very much become more about the people and getting to see everybody and spend time with everybody than the panels or getting autographs or getting pictures anymore, because I want to be with the family that I've chosen because of Star Trek.
I have to say, I agree with you. I when I first started going, I got the captain's chair ticket, and I got the captain's chair for many, many, many years in a row. And I realized that the number of years I was going, the less and less time I was actually spending in the main theater. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, well, why am I getting this ticket? Because I want to have the seat that's closer up. You know, the gold tickets have all the autographs and stuff, which I don't collect. And so I don't want that. So I always got that captain's chair. But then I thought, my goodness, I'm spending half the time, you know, with my friends at their events that they're putting on, or other different kinds of events that have nothing to do with what level of ticket I have. So I've been cutting back on my level of ticket year after year, because I find that it's more about the people than anything else at this point. And it's the other fans. It's those horizontal relationships among the fans, as opposed to the vertical relationships where it's us and Paramount or CBS these days, or us and the actors. Mm-hmm. But I find that's something that's really powerful for me. So I want to ask about cosplay. Do you cosplay at all? And what is appealing about that for you?
I do. I only have one cosplay outfit, and it's fun. You know, it's the one time where I dress up and you get asked who you are. It's kind of fun. So mine is, I have the TNG Sciences. I have the scant uniform, and I am a half Vulcan science officer. So I'm that ever elusive, never really see the science officers except for like a couple episodes when there's a whole bunch of them in like stellar cartography.
Right. Well, there was one in Lower Decks, I think.
Yeah. So
and Dr. Solar.
Yeah, I mean there are science officers, and you'll see them, but like it's usually just like one or two. You'll see them in the hall walking, but they don't have any lines or anything. The most science officers you see is in lessons, and that's because they're all in stellar cartography.
Right.
So that's the only one I quote unquote cosplay, but me and my daughter, we love Halloween, so we always dress up every year. But that's Halloween. I mean, yeah. But this year we'll see if I am able to go to Vegas. We'll see if I can pull off a DS9 specific cosplay.
Oh, you're not going to spill the beans?
No. Fingers crossed. The only thing I will say is that if I can pull it off, I'm probably not going to wear it very long because heels hurt my feet.
I totally understand. It sounds like the right thing to do. Not wear them all.
Or I'll be sitting a lot. One of the two.
All right. Well, I look forward to seeing it. But before we leave this topic, I have to ask this one question. You have to tell us what band it was you came to Vegas to see.
Aerosmith.
All right. Okay. Very good. So I just couldn't let that go by.
No, that's okay.
We'll call it idle curiosity. So now, one of the things that always interests me about fandom, especially Star Trek fandom, and one of the reasons I want to do this podcast was exploring the different ways that we actively live and exercise our fandom. And so some people go to conventions, some people do cosplay, some people do both, and that's fine. Are you a collector of anything? What do you collect and why?
Yeah. If I could show you the bookshelf I have, it has some Star Trek books, but it doesn't have any other books on it. Yeah, I started again, like I'm pretty sure it started with t-shirts, and the first non t-shirt item that I got, my best friend gave me the TNG Pez dispenser set that came out a few years ago. And I'm kind of weird. Like, I'm one of those people that I don't necessarily open everything. So I haven't even opened it. Plus, I don't like Pez candy because it's gross. So it's still sitting in the box.
Totally agree on the Pez. Yeah. Nasty.
And then I think one of the other things, so again, when I was working at Old Navy, we wore lanyards and we had our name tags and stuff. So I bought a lanyard that I could wear. There was a Star Trek lanyard, and I bought my science badge pin, and I put it on my lanyard. So those were some of the first few things that I got, and now we're at the point where I don't really have much room on the bookshelf anymore. It's kind of taken over. There's books. There's I have a bunch of the fan set pins. I have
fan sets is great stuff.
Yes, they are. I have some shot glasses. I have mugs that I actually use, so they're in my cabinet. I have a bunch of the pop vinyl figures. If they were listening, I would tell them to please make a Dr. Crusher and a Wesley Crusher one for TNG. Why they haven't done that, I don't know. But I do have all of the TNG ones. And, my parents get me stuff. My brother gets me Star Trek stuff. I buy myself more Star Trek stuff, even though I don't know where to put it anymore.
So let's talk about that for a second, though. It's an interesting idea, because it's one thing to enjoy the show and to talk about it and to think about what it might be like to be in that universe and that sense of hope. What is it about the collecting that gives you pleasure?
It's really fun. I mean, there's some stuff that's out there that's just kind of unique and different. Like I recently got for my birthday, I got the QMX Mirror Universe Tribble.
Oh, is that the one with the fangs?
It's the one with the fangs. It's red and black. They only like Klingons. They don't like anybody else. So, and it's really fun. When people come over, I enjoy talking about it. Again, it makes a talking point. So there's not very many people that come over and hang out at my apartment who don't know about my love of Star Trek. But at the same time, I appreciate it, and it's really fun. It's fun to see the different things that either people make. Last year in Vegas, I got a wallet that there's a lady, and she has a booth there, and she makes bags and wallets and stuff like that with fabric that you can find, which I wish I could sew, because then I would make so much Star Trek stuff out of the fabric, but I can't. And it's really fun because stuff like that, I carry it around, and if I'm out somewhere, it's a talking point, because then people are like, oh, that's really cool. Oh, it's Star Trek. Oh, that's really cool. You like Star Trek, and can get into that conversation if they like it, or, why, and that sort of stuff. But a lot of it, it's just memories. Most of the stuff that I have has probably been given to me. Quite a bit I've bought for myself, but some of it has been gifted to me, and it's really fun, and just creates memories. And now that my daughter is enjoying Star Trek more than she used to be just big on Harry Potter, but I'll be able to pass a lot of it down to her when she gets older if she wants any of it, and be like, yeah, sure.
Do you show her the bookshelf and then say, all this, scion of my loins, shall be yours one day? Along with all but I should. Along with all my Quatloos. All the Quatloos shall be yours.
No, but I should. I mean, there is one thing that, if push come to shove and she ever was in a major pinch, she could sell it, and it probably would fetch a good penny. But, and I have a poster that I bought the first year I went to Vegas. And it was a poster that was done for the Destination Star Trek that they do in London.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for TNG, obviously. So it's got the ship and stuff. And this last year in Vegas, I had Sir Patrick Stewart sign it. And then I went to Salt Lake Comic-Con, which is the next closest convention to me, and Will Wheaton was there, so he signed it. So I have all the main cast from TNG signatures on that poster. So that is probably my most prized possession, and I have it framed. It's on my dresser in my room because it's my favorite.
Oh, it sounds fantastic. It certainly sounds like it deserves to be your favorite. So. Yeah. All right, I want to turn to a deeper topic then. We've talked a little bit about how you got into Trek and the different series and how you experienced or didn't experience some of them. We've talked about how you choose to live your fandom in various ways and through various channels. But one of the questions that I think is important to talk about on the show is, Hayley, in what significant ways do you feel that Star Trek affects how you live your life, if at all? How has it affected maybe the choices that you make or the things that you do in the world?
Again, it kind of was that guiding point. I've always been the person to listen. Growing up with my friends, I was always the one that they would turn to have someone to listen. And so I think for me, again, Troy, even though she wasn't always written the best, Guinan, Dr. Crusher were, they were strong women and they were on the ship. And yes, there were plenty of other women on that ship, but they were the main women. And it was really inspiring to see that I can make choices myself and I can be that person, and kind of helped push me into the field that I'm in. I have my degree in psychology, and granted, I think I was just inevitably born to go that route. But I think watching their characters on the show kind of really helped push me in that way. I'm a tree hugger. I'm an earth lover. So I'm all about, recycling, do what we can, because this is the only planet we've got. I don't do a whole lot, I guess, probably just because my field of work doesn't necessarily allow me to do, but I'm always following science, following articles, reading articles. I try to encourage my daughter, because she loves science and math, that, she can do whatever she wants. We watched Trek. We watched Hidden Figures. She thought it would be really cool to work for NASA. I said, hey, if that's what you want to do, go for it, because I encourage her in what she enjoys, because she's the future and she's going to inherit it. And her generation, or maybe the generation after hers, if we encourage them in these things, then maybe at some point we will get there, or we will get steps closer to being at this world where we want to be in this place where maybe we can go into space. Maybe we can figure all these things out. Maybe we can make replicators or holodecks, which, we're kind of getting there anyway. Maybe we can make personal transporters. We can make this stuff happen if we encourage the younger generations to see the future for what it is and make it their own. And that's probably the biggest thing that I do.
So it sounds like Star Trek has not only influenced, I don't want to put too big a point on it, but influenced your choice of career, and also is informing the way that you're educating your daughter in a way.
In a way, yeah. I mean, she's always loved school. She loves going to school. I probably have one of the few kids who gets bored on Christmas break and can't wait to go back to school. But she definitely loves science and she loves math. And she's enjoying history to a point as well, which I think is important. But I think having those conversations and sharing my love of this and showing her, hey, this was maybe just a TV show, but that doesn't mean that we can't make aspects of it a reality. And I think having those conversations and definitely sharing it and encouraging her in her love of math and science to do whatever she wants with it is a way I can leave a footprint on her generation and hopefully the generation after hers.
Sounds like a positive message, and it sounds to me like that's what Star Trek's all about.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I mean, we can't do a whole lot, but we can do what we can. And if we can encourage the kids that are coming up to want to have those things and not just see the world for what it is, but see it for what it can be, I'm all for it.
All right. Well, Hayley, it is now time for the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Are you ready?
I am ready.
M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulator and prepare to record Hayley's responses.
Working. Simulation loaded and ready.
All right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Which is the better film, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, or Star Trek Nemesis?
Star Trek V.
You've won an all-expense-paid vacation to one of these two planets. Which one do you pick, Ferenginar or Nimbus 3?
Ferenginar.
Would you rather visit the USS Shenzhou or the USS Discovery?
USS Discovery.
Worst pet idea ever, a Klingon Targ or a Cardassian Vole?
Klingon Targ.
Time for breakfast, egg white burritos with fire-roasted salsa or a green shake, extra green?
Green shake, extra green.
M5, please calculate the data and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Hayley, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has determined that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations. And so to honor your passing of this time-honored test, the M5 will now award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our podcast.
Hayley is awarded the honorary title of Special Federation Ambassador of the Romulan Star Empire.
Ooh.
So there you go. Hayley, thank you so much for being a part of Trek Profiles. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
And once again, let people know how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I am the handle at Trekkie01D.
Here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you that you may send your thoughtful comments, constructive feedback, or pleas of mercy to feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter at Trek Profiles. Anything you send us may or may not be used against you in the court of Star Trek opinion or on the show itself. Who knows? This week, I leave you with a quote from Admiral Kirk, who said in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, "I haven't faced death. I've cheated death. I've tricked my way out of death and patted myself on the back for my ingenuity. I know nothing." So Admiral Kirk and Jon Snow have something in common. Who knew? Thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next time on the podcast. Live long and prosper.